Okay, hello everyone who is watching our YouTube live stream or the recording of this week's Growth Call. I'm Christoph Atteneder and I'm your host today. As always, I already posted the Google Hangout invitation link in the chat on the left, so you can join us here in the Hangout like Manfred and Scott is doing today. If you just want to watch the live stream, feel free to post your comments and questions in the live chat, and we'll try to answer them either at the end of the call or during the call. So keep us posted with any questions you have. Our growth calls like the one today are about everything that helps to grow the Bisq network. If you don't know it by now, Bisq is the only true decentralized exchange to exchange fiat with cryptocurrencies, but also crypto with other cryptocurrencies. So if you're interested in more details, please have a look at the introduction video on Bisq, which I will link in the description below after the call. So I'm very excited that we have Scott and probably in roughly 15 minutes also Justin from the Monero community with us to discuss a couple of ideas on how to improve the Monero support in Bisq. Before we start, just a super quick update on the market. Last week, at this time, we had about, I think, 2.6 million in volume, and it wasn't sure if we would surpass our all-time high by then of 3.1 million, which was last December. And yeah, at the moment, we are standing around, I think, 4.3 million, a little bit more than 4.3 million. And it looks like that we maybe even reach 5 million. So it's incredible month for Bisq. And that's mainly because of the Monero market. So I think, I'm not sure how many percent, but I think it's around 95, 90, 96% of the total volume is from the Monero market. And that's one of the reasons why we are discussing today how we can support this market and to keep this volume, not just this month, but also for the upcoming month. So thanks, Scott, for being here today. Manfred created a new proposal for a Monero wallet feature and will also guide from now on the discussion. Maybe just before we start, Scott, could you give us a quick intro on your involvement in the Monero community, and maybe also why are you interested in Bisq?
Yeah, so I guess quick brief blurb on my Monero. So I got into Monero late 2016, early 2017, largely just because I saw kind of consumer privacy laws degrading. And oh, did I lose the connection? I'll continue talking. So basically, yeah. So I had been following Bitcoin for a decent amount of years, and I'm not a darknet user, but I had hoped that with the Silk Road busts in like 2014, basically privacy would be more of a focus within the Bitcoin community. And after several years of kind of the scale wars, the civil war, I kind of just gave up and was like, okay, I'm going to go and hunt for something. So I found Monero. My contributions are kind of small in my opinion and relatively just here and there as I'm able. So contributing the Japanese part of the Japanese translation for the initial GUI beta, helping out with coordinating the DEF CON. Monero was at DEF CON. It's a hacker conference in Las Vegas this past year. Yeah, it's largely, most of my contributions are just translation and DEF CON, I think, at this point. And I've known about Bisq for a while. I think similar to when I got into Monero, I got into Bisq in terms of just watching it, but the liquidity back in like late 2016 wasn't that great. So it was just, stick to the centralized exchanges for now. And hopefully the people who are focused on Bisq will be able to bring it up in, a couple of years. Like right now, there's a lot of Monero liquidity. So.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it was a long way since 2016 from the volume. I also personally just joined Bisq. I think it was roughly a year ago. And also, since just within this year, it's a crazy roller coaster ride, and yeah, it looks really good. Of course, also because of Monero. Sorry, Manfred, you wanted to, maybe you can give us a quick introduction. There are a couple of ideas from the Monero community, what we could do within the client, and you had some thoughts on the implementation details already.
Yeah, so it's a repeating request, which is coming from Monero community and which makes totally sense to add a fiat pair, also that you can trade directly Monero to any fiat currency, which would be basically that we have Monero as alternative base currency. We had this in the past with some other altcoins, which were technically very similar to Bitcoin, and for this reason, it was very easy for us to implement those. We had this for about 1 year, but then we removed it again because there were basically not enough interest and activity there. With Monero, for sure, it's different because it's a lot of trade activity there. But the big problem is that it would be a huge effort because Monero is very different to Bitcoin. And I'm not very sure how much Java support is available in Monero and how we can, also it's a big technical and engineering effort. It's basically doable because Monero support now multi-signature, which is a requirement for the current trade protocol. But I would estimate it for a very experienced developer, probably half a year work. So it's not a small thing to do. And we have some midterm plans for Bisq for an off-chain trade protocol, which will utilize special features of the Bisq DAO to make it possible to trade anything against anything. It doesn't need to be any cryptocurrency neither. And that would make this base currency approach completely obsolete, and it would not require the multi-sig concept and so on. So it would make life much easier to support other other trading pairs which are not possible at the moment because Bitcoin need to be one part of the trade. So I think
Manfred, so Manfred, that would mean that you can trade Monero with fiat currency or with whatever you want.
You can trade bananas with apples and Monero against dollar or whatever you want. And it's, I mean, off-chain is maybe not 100% correct because you need to have a BSQ bond, and BSQ is technically Bitcoin, but it's a little bit like with Lightning. With opening a Lightning channel, you only need to do this once. So you're setting up a BSQ bond for a certain amount, and in the range of this amount, you can trade. So when you set up a BSQ bond, which has a value of $10,000, then you can trade in parallel up to $10,000. And the trades itself can be done anything, so they are not bound to any cryptocurrency. And I think also we have not worked out all the details for this idea and proposal, but we are getting closer, and it seems feasible, and also it's pretty realistic that we are going in this direction. So it would be not a good idea to invest now time and effort and money to implement Monero as alternative base currency, and maybe in half a year or in 1 year we are moving to this off-chain trade protocol, and then all this effort is basically for nothing. And this off-chain trade protocol has a lot of benefits. I mean, with the current trade protocol, there are a few issues. One main issue is that you have several transactions involved, which costs transaction fees, which is not a big issue at the moment. But back in December, when transaction fees in Bitcoin were up to $40, so it was an issue. And at some point, it will come again to become an issue. And also in Monero, I think the transaction fee is super low in Monero at the moment. But it's a question, I mean, when they stay always low, then it's a sign of no success. So when Monero and Bitcoin become more successful, the trade fee will be more expensive. So it's not really future-proof to build on this system that we are requiring at the moment for a transaction, but at least maybe they can be optimized to 2 transactions, but 2 transactions with something like $10 or $20 for one transaction and mining fee is still too expensive and costs a lot of friction. And the off-chain trade protocol is completely open. You can transfer your assets, whatever you want to use, like Lightning, or send it by email, by mail, or whatever. It's not bound to the trade protocol. And my proposal is that we are first focusing on something which will be viable also for such a new, in case we have such a new trade protocol, and that would be to have a Monero wallet integrated in Bisq. So you can send, when you make a Bisq trade with Monero, you can send the Monero and confirm the Monero receipt directly in Bisq. And technically, the easiest way would be to just connect to Monero daemon, which is run in background. I think most Monero users are very technical users, and they're running their full node anyway. And then connect with RPC between the Bisq client and the Monero daemon. The daemon can be even started automatically by Bisq in background, so the user don't need to do anything extra. We are doing basically the same with Tor. We are running the Tor native binary and communicating over a TCP channel, TCP control channel with Tor. So we have the benefit to have always the reference implementation and get all the best, the native code and basically the same model we could do with Monero. Of course, when the user has already their Monero running, they can configure it to use this one. And a nice, interesting feature might be that because we have Tor by default, that we are offering a automatic setup that Monero is routed. All the Monero traffic is routed over Tor as well, so the user don't need to do the Tor setup manually, which is maybe not a big deal for Monero users because they are very technical. But for those who are not so technical, it makes life easier. They don't need to learn how to do this manually. And the big benefit would be that we could automate the Monero trade. We have at the moment, there's quite a lot of work going on with APIs with the intention that you can automate the full trades for trading bots and so on. And you could, when you take an offer, or even your script could then take the offer, and then the sending of the Monero and the confirm of the receipt of the Monero can be done automatically because it's then all available in the software. And that would speed up trade a lot, would make it much more convenient for power users or power traders. And I think that's not a super huge effort. For sure, it's also quite a bit of effort. But from my rough guts estimation, it could be done maybe just a basic to have it manually without this automated trading, because that requires also more work on the API level. To just have it more for convenience, that you have Monero, that you have one UI, where a very basic Monero wallet just for sending and confirming the receipt. And with the RPC setup, I think it can be done in 1 month, so it's not a huge deal. I was actually, a few years ago, I was starting to work on a Monero UI client, and this time there was no official UI client. There was only a .NET and a Java version out. And I tried to use what I had already in Bisq to offer an alternative Monero client, which was based on the same idea to have Monero D in the background with RPC and just the UI, which is presenting it nicely. And and I started on working on this. I worked a few days, but then I figured out it was more work like I expected in the beginning, like always. But I think it's not really such a big deal. I mean, with implementing Monero as base currency, it's really a big deal because Bitcoin as base currency is part of the wallet, and it touches a lot of areas. You need to recreate the trade protocol to adapt it to the differences with Monero. And then the most effort will be to change the wallet code to make it work with Monero. And here is another point where we have some plans for improvements, and where it would make life easier to implement this later when we have changed this already, and I make it more clear what I mean. We are using at the moment Bitcoin J, which has several problems. One of the main problem is the privacy issue with Bloom filters, which we have somehow solved by connecting to provided Bitcoin nodes, which are operated by Bisq developers. So by default, you're not losing your privacy to open public nodes, which are operated by chain analysis companies. But of course, it's a little bit of centralization and a trust issue. And I mean, users can configure to use the public network, but then they are running into their chain analysis companies and lose their privacy nearly for sure. But a bigger problem is that Bitcoin J there's not a lot of development going on there. They still have not implemented SegWit and many other features. So they are lagging behind Bitcoin Core a lot. And basically what we would like to have is to run Bitcoin Core in background as a daemon, similar like Tor or like this idea with Monero as well. and communicate as well over RPC or anything else. And the only thing, we need to find a solution to have a lightweight version. And there is one pull request from Jonas Schnelli where he implemented a kind of like SPV-like version of Bitcoin Core, which is designed the way that you can use it very quickly. You don't have to wait a day or whatever for the full block download and so on. And it's a open task for investigation if we can find a solution where we don't have the requirement that you download the 200 gigabyte and wait and do all this heavy work, because that's for many users not possible then. But I think there could be find a solution where we use Bitcoin Core as a light version, which doesn't have more resource requirements like Bitcoin J at the moment. Then we would have the benefit that we always have the latest reference clients with all the speed and the privacy and security there. Also, perfect solution. We could communicate via RPC. We have basically the wallet part completely outside of Bisq, which has additionally security benefits, because Bitcoin Core, of course, there are many more eyes on this, like on Bisq. And we are looking at the moment for a Bitcoin for a developer who is very experienced with Bitcoin J and Bitcoin, and we have one promising candidate for this. And when we have the dev resources, we would like to work on investigate first if it's feasible, if it's doable, and when, then we probably will work on this, which is also a big task, probably roughly a few months, half a year. But when we would have made this first transition, that we have externalized all the wallet stuff to Bitcoin Core, or have separated this out of Bisq itself, then after this, it would be much easier to do the same with Monero when we still want to do it as a base currency, because then it's a very similar model. Then instead of communicating with Bitcoin Core, we would communicate with Monero, and there are less changes required like now. Now the code is heavily depending on Bitcoin J, and Bitcoin J doesn't work with Monero, so we have to replace all this area, and that's quite tricky and a lot. So with that, two different perspectives. So one is this off-chain trade protocol, and the other is to get rid of Bitcoin J and to get Bitcoin Core as our native binary daemon in background. I think it's probably more reasonable to wait before we are starting to put a lot of effort in supporting Monero as base currency, and then maybe this effort is worthless because maybe it's then already we have moved in another direction, and then we have a outdated implementation and just wasted a lot of effort. And I think I would suggest, when there are some Monero developers who are experienced, a little bit at least experienced with Java and of course with Monero, to work on this, that they are integrating a Monero wallet in Bisq. I think that's quite feasible and not super, it doesn't cost a lot of effort, and that would be, I think, a good first step to improve the support of Monero, to make automated trade possible as soon as the APIs are more developed. That would be maybe the next step, and I think that it would be just a better roadmap, and also would fit much more to the philosophy what we have, to make small steps and not make huge effort, because it takes a lot of risk. I mean, the efforts, I know that Monero has their own way to fund such efforts, which is great, and it can be maybe combined or mixed or whatever. But with Bisq and the Bisq DAO, we have also our own funding model, where developers who are adding value to Bisq, and that would be definitely such a candidate, would get paid in BSQ. So any developer can assume that it will get compensated in BSQ, and the best way here is as well to make small steps and not make huge effort, which takes half a year, and maybe then they don't get the agreement from the community when it doesn't match their expectations or whatever. So to start with a very small, simple, just maybe whatever, with the the most simple version of integration of Monero into Bisq, and then with automated trading, I think that's I would recommend to go in this direction. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Justin. We are already middle in the call. Justin, maybe can you give us a quick introduction on your background regarding Monero and your interest in Bisq? It would be great. And then maybe Manfred, could you sum up very shortly what we were talking about?
So I actually heard about the last 5 minutes on YouTube as I was wrapping up my other class. So I got a little bit of initial context. Again, sorry for being a little bit late. So I'm Justin. I am the organizer of the Monero community work group. We help to encourage adoption and projects built on top of Monero, and Bisq is obviously one that aligns very closely with the efforts that we have in Monero, so we're very pleased. I had the privilege of meeting Manfred twice when I was in Vienna and in Barcelona, so we've had a chance before to talk about Bisq and essentially the relationship with Monero. I know there's generally a lot of overlap, so I'm excited by Bisq. I'm excited by Monero. I think that in the future, I think it would be fantastic for our two projects to work more closely together. I think Bisq is very well known within the Monero community, and I think there'd be good ways for the community to sort of leverage this different development efforts and the different initiatives that both of the communities have.
Cool. Yeah, Manfred, maybe can you still just wrap up these two ideas that you had regarding the Monero integration, so we can continue the discussion from that.
I try to make it as short as possible. I'm not very good at this usually. Also, there are these requests to add Monero as base currency to Bisq, which is basically a very good idea, and I would support it. It has just a problem that it's a lot of effort, and we have two plans which would be in contradiction with going in this direction. One, the major plan is to implement the off-chain trade protocol, which will be based on the Bisq DAO. And with that, there is no base currency anymore. You can trade bananas with apples. You don't need a cryptocurrency anymore. And that would make it very easy then to add support for Monero to fiat currencies. And we are very concrete with going in this direction. And it's maybe in half a year or so. It's not super far away. It depends on the dev resources, what we have. And the other thing is that we would like to get rid of Bitcoin J, which we use for the Bitcoin part and the wallet part, and which would make it at the moment very complicated to change to a Monero trade protocol, because you need to re-implement then all the wallet handling and the coin handling and so on. But we have the plan to get rid of Bitcoin J and use Bitcoin Core in a SPV mode, also in a lightweight mode, and run this as a binary in background, the same way like we use Tor. And when we would have implemented this, then it would be also easier when we still want to do the Monero as base currency thing. Then the wallet part is already much easier to change because it was already in the architecture, which makes it easier to exchange with Monero. And my suggestion is to work first on integration of a Monero wallet in Bisq, which is not so difficult. It's basically a connection with RPC to Monero daemon. And the good thing is we probably can easily make it possible to start to run the daemon or the network, have all the network connection of the daemon over Tor, because Bisq by default has Tor, without requiring the user to do any setup with Tor. So that would be a nice extra cookie. And and it's basically just a simple UI that the user can do the Monero transfer and confirm the receipt in Monero directly in Bisq and talking with RPC to Monero D. And in a second step, we could add automated trade support, so you can you can automate your whole trade. You can take an offer, or even a script can take some offer, doing the Monero transfer and confirming Monero receipt. And with that, we get a big feature, because then people who are more professional traders, market makers, they prefer to work with scripts and don't do too much manual work. And I think both also with this automated trade, we are working anyway on APIs and want to get for altcoins generally in that direction to make it possible to automate the trades. And it would add already a lot of value. It doesn't give the big thing that you can trade Monero to fiat directly. Of course, I understand very much the the request for this, and I agree that would be a great feature to have. But I think it's maybe a little bit too early at the moment, and maybe the investment, also this huge investment to get there, might be then lost when we are changing our plans, like with off-chain trade protocol, or with changing with getting rid of Bitcoin J and having another implementation, and then we have two very different implementations which we need to maintain, and that makes everything very difficult. And
yeah.
Regarding the funding, also with the Bisq DAO, we have a model to fund development work. So any developer who wants to work on this can expect that he get paid in BSQ. I mean, BSQ is still not live. End of the year, hopefully we go live, but in 2 weeks or so we launch a testnet. And we're doing the Bisq DAO already since more than a year. It's just that you cannot trade it, and it's kind of like not really, it's not a real value at the moment, but it's a promise, and all the Bisq contributors at the moment are working based on this. But of course, it can be also combined with the funding model what Monero is using for funding projects and so on and whatever. I'm completely open to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sounds awesome. To clarify, I didn't mean to suggest, at least, that you just completely disregard all the sort of work you're working on. It seems like you have a very good, well-structured, thought-out model for how you want to plan to progress. My intent was only to say, hey, it would be great to eventually have Monero direct to fiat pairs, because it seems like there's a lot of interest there. And that doesn't mean that you have to do it before this big transition and throw all the work away. I think that you definitely have good steps forward in order to work to change a little bit of the background structure. You were already in the process of this large overhaul. So it seems like that's still obviously what you should focus on. And I totally encourage that and understand that. And I hope that it definitely seems like there's still interest in adding further support for Monero in the future. So after this transition and the initial sort of wallet implementation to make things easier, it seems like it's really setting up Bisq to have much greater support for Monero in the future. It seems like the architecture is getting put in the proper places, and I think it's great progress forward.
As I'm not so familiar with Monero, is there just one wallet everyone is using, or are there different implementations that use different kind of standards or daemons?
Yeah, so there's one major like CLI GUI release. They really follow the same Monero core structure. The GUI is basically just a wrapper for the daemon. And there are several different language interfaces that communicate with this daemon. There is a Java written implementation to communicate with this daemon that has actually received a lot of work over the past year. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it's definitely a lot better than when I was first speaking to Manfred, when we were both like, yeah, there's pretty much nothing right now. And so there was a few other wallets that people use, but those are generally still built upon the existing architecture. They basically just have a different front end for it. There are a few built from the bottom up. There's a JavaScript implementation that is much more verbose in how it's built up. But there is a generally main implementation that people use, which supports RPC, and there are different interfaces that allow other languages to connect to the main client with these RPC commands.
Yeah, by the way, I was checking yesterday a little bit the Monero exchange market, and to my surprise, Bithumb get something like 93%. Or I don't remember exactly the number, but super high amount of the overall trade volume, which I'm not so super familiar with the details regarding the privacy, but I have my assumption that it's a problem for Monero privacy and fungibility if there is basically one actor, one entity who controls a lot of transactions. Like, yeah, when basically 90% of all the Monero transactions are going through one entity, I think this entity could probably use this information, what they have, and the data, what they have, to maybe break fungibility and privacy. Can you comment on this, if this is true, or maybe I'm completely wrong with this and there's no risk at all?
Yeah, sure. So I actually do a lot of research with this in regards to Monero's ring signatures. The concern is less a specific node receiving transaction data and passing it along. That is not the major concern. The major concern is if a specific entity or a group of colluding entities were to have view key or spend access to these funds. Basically the equivalent of having a sort of private key with over Bitcoin funds if there was a case where there was a large number of custodial wallets or something of a similar scenario. And what that basically means is Monero, well, taking a small step back, Monero's entropy is provided by the sum of all the outputs in the system. So just the sums of money that people have. So when I send a Monero transaction, I obviously spend my own money, but I also make it appear as if other sources of funds could be spent. If one adversary or a group of adversaries contain or possessed or had view access over a substantial number of the total Monero supply, then that would be a potential, that is a potential concern. Luckily, since Monero has ring sizes that are quite large now, by mandate, you can't send smaller ring sizes anymore. It's really getting to the point where this concern is one that we're really not worried about anymore. Sure, some exchanges might be able to do some information, but it would be the minority of the ring signature. You'd still have better protections now after their analysis than you did like a year ago, or potentially a little bit of time before. So there's definitely still concerns, but we still have better protections now. I generally am not worried about one exchange potentially routing a good amount of information unless they're routing over the majority of the total volume and total number of transactions on the network.
So the main concern is basically the custodial risk that a lot of Monero is sitting at one entity, and when they get goxed, then you run the Monero price will crash, and the whole community suffer huge damage.
Exactly. So so for Bisq's perspective, since you aren't running a custodial wallet and you are not running a wallet with a requirement that they need to receive your view key to operate, I would not worry about this risk. You should consider the node risk, but that is that hurts the user that is individually trading. It doesn't hurt every other user on the network. So it's a different sort of, it's a much lower threat model.
Okay, thanks. Just one, Raimondas want to ask a question. He just joined the call as well. Raimondas?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much we can go off topic or in different areas. So, well, you can always choose not to answer if it goes way too much of today's topic. But I was following some of the developments you've been doing recently and find it quite interesting, the notification part where you go being notified by an app in case there's a trade that someone wants to take the trade or offer something that you would like. My question is, I'm not a developer myself, so I might be asking something wildly, not making sense, but a messaging app which is called Stealthy is built on a block stack, and I find it interesting how that integrates into Graphite, which is another decentralized app. And I was wondering, could that be also a way forward into the future where Bisq would not need to develop necessarily every part, but could just integrate some other decentralized projects into Bisq? Is that even making sense?
I don't know both of those projects. I was contacting actually Signal Messenger for asking if there are some APIs and some possibility that they are basically providing the infrastructure what we wanted to do with the notification app, and I never got the answer. And I have never heard that they are offering public APIs where somebody could hook in and use basically Signal. And Signal, from my perspective, is one of the with the best reputation from the privacy perspective. But my general experience, and I got burned at least 1 or 2 times at the end with Bisq, is that I try to avoid a dependency to other projects, which are, at least when they are really important features in Bisq, because when they have problems, then they're usually huge projects where you don't have the time and the skills to fix their problems. So you are depending to wait until they're doing it, and when they never do it, you are stuck. I had this with the peer-to-peer network in the early days with the DHT, which was never really working in the real internet, and then I needed to implement my own peer-to-peer network. And now with Bitcoin J, we have a similar problem. They are still not supporting SegWit and many other features. It's a huge project. Of course, when we would have billions or millions, we could fund development and find developer working on this, but we don't have this, and basically we are stuck. So my approach is to either only use really reference implementations like Tor, like Bitcoin Core, or like Monero D, where we basically know those are the leading on the leading technology side. You cannot make it better basically in that space, or implement it ourselves, because then we are independent. And with notification, there we have a peer-to-peer system. It was not a big challenge to send the message or the network stuff and the cryptographic stuff. It's more conceptual, but that's maybe a little bit too much for to break out of this topic. The conceptual challenge is how you marry or how you combine inherently centralized infrastructure like mobile phones, which are depending on the companies who are sending the notifications and so on, Apple and Google, and how you combine this world with a pure decentralized and peer-to-peer and privacy protecting environment. And that's pretty challenging and difficult. And maybe there is no perfect solution, and maybe those people who want to get this convenience to have this notification app and maybe in future do more over this mobile app, they have to lose a little bit of privacy of security, because we have not found yet a perfect solution to really stick with this high level of privacy and decentralization when it comes to these infrastructures. But I mean, when anybody has more experience with these applications and see solutions, I'm open, of course. I just I cannot follow all the projects. There are so many projects out, and many projects have very high promises. And when you look a little bit closer, you see there's 99% marketing, and and the blockchain is usually not solving problems on the messaging area. So it's solving the consensus problem and the double spam problem, and the usage of blockchain for many other areas. I think it's very overhyped. But of course, I don't know this project, and maybe they have great ideas, so I don't want to be too negative here. It's just I got, from my experience, very, very often it's basically lost time when you investigate and then find out now it was just marketing.
That makes sense. I must say I have tried it out, both of the apps, and so far they were working fine for me. And the reason why I even mentioned it is because I find a lot of similarities between Bisq and app like Stealthy, where it's decentralized and it's also anonymous, and in fact you don't even need a phone number to set up this messaging app, because it works a very similar way like crypto, where you have your private key, and that's how you go about it. And the exciting part is that this messaging app is integrating well with other decentralized projects. That's why I thought maybe that could be something for you. But I can definitely introduce you to more of this if you're interested later on.
Yeah, I think that the best way would be to talk it through on Slack, and if it's getting more concrete, I guess like Manfred did it for the Monero wallet integration or the proposal for the off-chain. We have on GitHub the proposal repository where there's a good place to come up with big ideas that needs to get kind of validated and discussed. And if it finds their consensus, then it might move into implementations. I have another question regarding Monero. How does the Monero community trade at the moment? If they don't use Bisq, are there kind of common gateways to exchange crypto with crypto, or with even Monero directly to fiat, besides a face-to-face trade?
Sure. So this depends on the person a little bit. You can go on CoinMarketCap or some similar service to see general volume. But I know that, especially in the past, Monero was traded frequently on Poloniex. It still is often traded on Poloniex, but the proportion has fallen a little bit over the years. There are local services such as Local Monero, but the total volume there is relatively small compared to these large exchanges. It's on Binance, it's on Kraken, it's on Bittrex, I believe. So there are a few other centralized exchanges. I know that in regards to online decentralized exchanges, Monero has the highest volume on Bisq, I believe, compared to any other similar-ish even just exchange. I know it was added to Waves. I really don't know anything about Waves though, and the volume on Waves is lower than it is on Bisq. So there are a few other options out there. I think most people that are getting involved with Monero probably just use a standard centralized exchange. And if they're an enthusiast that wants to prioritize their privacy, they will use a service such as Bisq. They'll use local Monero. They might use a conversion service that has no registration, such as until recently Shapeshift or other services like Morph Token. And then a common service to go from Monero to Bitcoin is XMR.2, which is a one-click conversion just from Monero to Bitcoin, but they don't wait for confirmations or anything, so it's a really easy way to make private payments. Those are that's your ecosystem of exchanges and those services in a quick nutshell.
So if you are wearing our shoes, what would you do to win over as many of the Monero traders as possible? Is there anything that Bisq is lacking besides, of course, the liquidity is quite good, especially for Monero. Is there anything else that it's missing to attract more Monero traders, market makers?
So it's generally hard to. I think you really have two sort of target markets to attract here. I think your first target market are people that are Monero enthusiasts, that are generally familiar with what it is, and generally value privacy in some way. I think those are, by and large, the best group that Bisq has a real chance of winning people over with, at least to begin with. I think perhaps the easiest way is really the fiat on-ramp. I think that it's easier generally to purchase Monero with a credit card, debit card, direct bank account transfer on some of these centralized services. And so I think that's why people who prioritize convenience probably go this way. So if there's someone sort of in between the two different types of Monero enthusiasts, whether they're a large Monero enthusiast or are there for the sake of mostly trading, I think that the way to help push them over the edge is probably an easier way to acquire or to put fiat on Bisq and make it proceed there. I think that that Bisq stands a much better chance of attracting people now that it has more liquidity. In the past, even some of the enthusiasts were like, I want to use Bisq, but there aren't too many trades going on there. Luckily, that argument isn't a major issue anymore. Sure, there maybe are some slight differences, but the margin's still pretty small now, and there's a good amount of volume that hopefully you can attract more of these people over. I think generally it's just the sort of interface that's provided is generally a little bit better understood for centralized exchanges, and it's easier to initially one-click sign up. I know that with your service you don't have a registration, and with an exchange you do, but with the centralized exchange they put a lot of work facilitating that initial registration process, initial deposit process to get you to put funds into the system. And so I really think it's that sort of first mile approach that might prevent people from jumping directly to Bisq. I think part of it is a little bit of either lack of understanding to, or lack that this exists. If someone if someone's coming from the outside into the Monero ecosystem, they'll probably search for an exchange and find a centralized service. So part of that might even be things like SEO. But I think that with time, Bisq is definitely on a strong growth path. It has a lot of the pieces in place now. As the initial onboarding process becomes simpler, I think that you can stand a much better chance to attract some of the users that are more interested in trading or going where the volatility is or where the volume is, from my perspective. But I'm not a major trader. I think that if you wanted to get a little bit more idea on specific trader demographics or their thought processes, it would probably be worth reaching out to the XMR Trader Reddit. Granted, they're probably mostly enthusiasts themselves, but it'd still be a good place to start.
Yeah, sorry, Manfred, yeah?
No, continue, Christoph.
No, I just wanted to say, yeah, that the onboarding process is definitely where we could improve the system. And yeah, we saw, I also saw it for myself. If you did one trade, then doing more trades it's quite easy. It's just this first time to trust the system, to trust the process, that you're not losing anything, that everything works. If we can make it more easy and more trustful, I think that will help a lot. Manfred, sorry.
One question. Are there any exchanges where you can exchange Monero to fiat which are not under KYC? And the second question, are there still any exchanges where you can trade it to altcoins, so the Bitcoin or anything else, without KYC? Because I think that area, like with Shapeshift, is also getting more and more narrow.
Yeah, so in regards to people purchasing directly from fiat, those options are rare. The largest volume that's easily accessible is on Bisq. So in a way, you are the most simple and approachable way to purchase Monero without these requirements. And yeah, I believe every other service either has a very limited amount that's required or don't exist. So in the past, especially with services like Shapeshift, there's a better understanding of what's required to become registered with FinCEN in the United States and other regulatory bodies. I think in general, many people I've spoken to believe it should be possible to offer conversions less than a specific dollar threshold, be it $1,000 or so, without having to go through a significant registration process. Those services should be possible, but they don't really exist, at least in a meaningful way, for fiat pairs. In regards to cryptocurrency to cryptocurrency trading, there are a few other existing options. I mentioned Morph Token and XMR.2, with neither of which require any user registration to function, and those are Monero to other pairs.
Those projects, I assume, are run as companies. So I assume yes, as soon they become bigger and more relevant, they will get into the same issues like Shapeshift and local Bitcoin and have to implement KYC. I assume, that's my opinion, and we'll see how it works out. But in generally, I think at Bisq at the moment is not really ready for a bigger mainstream user audience, because yeah, we don't have the resources at the moment to go in this direction, also to have this much better streamlined user experience, and it requires a lot more effort to get there. And I think the extra costs on usability or on convenience, what you pay for using Bisq, is not a big problem for those people who are more connected to the cypherpunk mentality. And I think in the Monero community, there are a lot similar like in the core Bitcoin community. And I think it's basically not difficult to convince those people. So from my point of view, at the moment, we really should focus to just get the word out to reach those people, because there's still many people who have never heard about Bisq or have never tried it out, and who are many years core Bitcoin people or core Monero people. And I think that's probably the easiest way where we can grow. What would you expect in the Monero community? Of course, that's a completely difficult estimation, but from your gut feeling, how much of the percentage of those cypherpunk people, of those people who really care about privacy and security, who know about Bisq or who have even tried it out, and who are basically open percentage what we can easily get just by information, that they just need a little bit of more information about Bisq and maybe some help. Maybe I was wondering to make so kind of like super small trades with just something like $10 with a very good price. So people are just trying it out to pick this, and they only can do it as the first time. I said we could build something like this, that for first time users you get basically a free cookie or a very good price to attract those people to try it out. And they don't risk a lot with something like $10. They have tried it out, then they have learned it, and then they can decide if they like it or not.
I think generally among at least the core, like really close-knit Monero community, I think Bisq is well understood and well respected. I think once you start to get to people who follow the news about Monero but don't actively engage in community meetings and so forth, the percentage probably drops off very quickly. So I think if you wanted to target a specific group, it might be the people who already trade Monero and who already follow Monero news, or likewise already follow Bitcoin and Bitcoin news, but are high proponents of privacy and security. I think those people would be potentially the best to reach out to. I can't really give a great percentage. I think that in general, just looking at volume isn't really looking at, or isn't really a good picture, because it's likely that a lot of the volume is fake, or that they will not ever use a decentralized system. So I think that I like to think that at the moment the volume on Bisq is like real volume, right? It's money that people are actually trading, and since there is some liquidity there, I think it will encourage people to go over. But I don't have great numbers on like how many people I assume would be involved. I think that really even simple things like creating a simple video, screen capturing your screen with OBS or whatever it might be, saying this is how you buy Monero, and it can be linked to anyone who wants to acquire Monero privately or however else. It would be great to have a single reference to give people instead of either a short text and having them go figure it out. This way they'd have some additional reference. And I think that would generally help that sort of initial YouTube-ish type style, really approachable to younger people, sort of helping people out there. Yeah. But I personally don't have too many other comments on this.
That's actually a great idea to make a how to trade Monero on Bisq video, and that's perfectly fine. Up for a BSQ bounty. So anybody who is able to produce a good quality video is welcome to do this and ask them for a BSQ compensation.
Scott, yeah. do you have any ideas?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, adoption of Bisq, I think, is, I mean, it's something that I'm strongly interested in, and I think Justin covered a lot of ground, and I think a lot of it boils down to the technical users, as I think everyone said, like they're willing to do kind of the hard work to kind of hack around and get something to work because their end goal is basically using Monero for, you know, its privacy functionality. And so I remember when I first joined kind of the Monero community, there was a really good guide written by, I think it was someone who went by the handle Monero Eric, who basically did kind of an objective analysis of these are two ways that people typically buy Monero. One was through Kraken with a direct fiat to Monero pairing. And then one was basically you buy on an exchange like Coinbase, and then you use Poloniex or Shapeshift. And, you know, Shapeshift is not necessarily ideal because it has a really high, that variable, I think at the time it was like a 7.5% fee, whereas Kraken, it's basically that it's more of a static variable. But so there is incentive too, because I know people in the XMR Trader subreddit have like complained about, I think was it Bitfinex, like still has what amounts to a $5 like withdraw fee. So I think, as I haven't personally used Bisq because again of the liquidity of Monero, but from what I understand, like it's relatively cheap. I mean, granted, you know, it will be, people perhaps charge a little bit of a premium because it's Bisq, so perhaps that financial incentive isn't as much there. But just I think kind of the main point, I guess, sorry, kind of rambling, is because Monero and Bisq, like the philosophies really align similarly. Like as community members like Justin, myself, Diego, and a whole bunch of other people, really creating guides for, as Justin said, to help new users, and like strongly advocating making kind of like Bisq, I don't know, like the exchange of choice for Monero users because of the similar philosophy alignment, and just kind of promoting Bisq. I know when I've done Monero presentations, I've typically, highlighted Bisq because it aligns similarly with the privacy philosophies. But yeah, I think it's part of it's word of mouth, and part of it's just creating guides, which the community has done. Like, there are a great deal of guides, I think, around like the translation work group that they've written. So like the community is no stranger to writing up great guides. So
yeah, that would be great to get some support from that. And regarding their spread and the costs, I think on Bisq, it's actually pretty good prices. So there are very often negative spread, which means you get it better like on the market price. And so 1% or something, so like something considerable. And the trade amounts are quite high. They're usually 1 Bitcoin. So it's quite a lot of money what you can save. What are the average spreads on the big exchanges like Kraken? Is it 1 or 2% between best buy and best sell? And another question, we use Bitcoin average. We get the price from Poloniex for altcoins. So that's our market price. And then when you create an offer, you can define a percentage-based price or a fixed price, but it's basically our orientation point. And of course, it would be interesting to know if this Poloniex price is really kind of like neutral and a good middle ground, or if it's often too far in one direction. And that might explain why there have been in the past quite often negative spreads in one direction at least, because maybe the Poloniex price is just off, and then somebody make a royal market price basically by offering it for 1%, minus 1% or so.
I probably would be the best person to talk about kind of exchange info, just because I simply just buy and use, so I don't really do a whole lot of market analysis. Justin might be able to. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here. I'm not an expert by any means, but the price currently is about $1 off, maybe $1.50 off compared to the Poloniex price. So it especially with the additional volume that we've seen the past few weeks and few months, it's gotten a lot closer. So I think that I would be less concerned now with higher volume at the disparity and prices compared to the past. I know the current state that a lot of people in the Monero community, and even people who aren't, I would say, like hugely in the Monero community, but just trade Monero, what they get annoyed by are the high exchange withdrawal fees. These often are about $5, and clearly the cost of a Monero transaction is significantly less than $5. At the moment, for a normal transaction, it's about half a cent. So you can see how there's definitely some annoyance there that Bisq can try and capitalize on, even for the everyday market maker compared to a Monero enthusiast. There's maybe some ability for you to reach out to people and get interest that way.
Yeah, so one direction where we would like to get more volume on Bisq, beside more information to get really good coverage in this core user group, or in this cypherpunk-minded people, will be to make it more easy for automating trades and for professional traders, market makers, with trading bots or with APIs, and to make it more easy for doing arbitrage, because I think often the prices at Bisq are giving good opportunities for earning money by arbitrage with other exchanges, to get those traders who are working in that area and who just need more convenient and easier ways to do it, and they're usually lazy to do it manually. Otherwise, they would do it already now. Another a little bit different question is, I mean, there have been, I think a year ago, I think all the Japanese exchanges have kicked out Monero as currency because of probably regulatory pressure. How much is this a concern in the Monero community, that basically the big exchanges at some point it could happen quite quickly, that one country is giving the lead and say, no, we don't want to have anonymity supporting cryptocurrencies. So we force basically over the regulatory bodies what they have in place, the exchanges to kick out Monero, and then the Monero market could suffer a lot when, like currently, it's depending on one huge exchange in Korea. At least if the volume data are right, I mean that's a big question mark. But how much concerns are in the Monero community about this risk that they basically get shut down by the exchanges?
So I think there is a concern generally within the Monero community. However, I don't think it's at least hugely warranted now in countries such as the United States and also most of Europe. Part of this goes through centralized exchanges that are well regulated and meet the regulations in the US. For example, Gemini, they have added Zcash, and although they have not added the private form of Zcash, they have outlined that they intend to, and there's nothing in the current regulatory guidelines, from my understanding, that would prevent them from doing so. Monero is already traded on regulated exchanges such as Poloniex, which is owned by Circle. So it has for a while been supported in these systems, and it's also even supported within Circle directly. So it's not like Circle bought Poloniex and is trying to get rid of Monero necessarily. They also added support for Monero directly in Circle, so presumably that would suggest that they would not put effort towards providing a unique solution to a relatively unique cryptocurrency if they didn't feel like they would be able to support it in some way. So I do think that that's generally a concern people have, and it's something that in the Monero community we're trying to better understand what these exact concerns are so we know how to address them. And in many cases, it's exchanges just not knowing, so they'll do the easy things. They'll add the transparent cryptocurrencies and then eventually figure out what to do with these more privacy-focused ones. But I don't think it's because of direct regulatory pressure. I think it's just ambiguity of regulatory pressure, people just wanting to be safe. And as you progress through the years, exchanges are getting a better idea on how to talk to regulators, how to stay compliant, and how to like add Monero in a way that is appropriate. So if there was a circumstance where exchanges were largely removed, I'm sure that use of Bisq would increase because it would be essentially one of your last options to trade on, and I think that would, in a way, benefit Bisq. I hesitate to say it would benefit Monero, though. There's some pros of centralized exchanges that allow people who are okay with abiding by regulation in those cases, or whatever it might be, to more easily trade, especially if you're a business, a certified investor, whatever the terminology is called in the US. It's something like that. So yeah, I think that there's some concern there in general in the Monero community, but we haven't, except for the one case with either South Korea or Japan, where some exchanges kind of shied away. I don't think there's been any other significant evidence of people really doing this on exchanges. There's no other, it's hard to measure the impact because I think at the moment it's still sort of a thought that gets thrown around, but there isn't a lot behind it.
Sorry, I have another question. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask everyone who is watching us live. So if you have any questions, just write it in the chat, and I will just read it out loud, and yeah, we'll try to answer it as quickly as possible. As the call, we won't push it too long. We are already above 1 hour, so maybe we give it another 15 minutes or so, and yeah. So if you have any questions, just write it down.
Sorry, I'm abusing the opportunity to have two experts here and who can answer some of my questions regarding Monero. One other question is how much, from your estimation and your gut feeling, is Monero used and important or active in more developing countries or countries which have much more problems with censorship, like Iran or also India? I think in India there have been a lot of issues with Bitcoin recently. other countries in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia or so? Is Monero pretty much distributed there, well known, or is it basically completely a niche?
I mean, I haven't traveled the world. I know Ricardo, Fluffy Pony. I can't remember if it was at DEF CON or just another one of his presentations was. I think it was he was traveling on his way to DEF CON and he stopped in South America or something to that effect, and he was talking about the value of privacy and just basically people not knowing how much you have is kind of an issue. So if people know how much you have and like Central kind of South America, they might basically hold you hostage or, basically harass you in such as a way to kind of steal what you own effectively, which you don't get with, like Bitcoin and a lot of other cryptocurrencies. And so Monero has value, for example, in like South America and those kinds of countries. I don't know about like the other countries like you mentioned, like Iran, and I forget what the other one was, but I know from kind of anecdotal conversation from Fluffy Pony, at least with people he's talked to, that people do see value in Monero. I don't know, the numbers, if that's a lot of people overall in those countries, but maybe perhaps Justin can comment as well.
Yeah, I don't have any specific numbers, unfortunately. We know that there is value to a private fungible currency. We just don't know how well it's getting its name out there. Based off what data we have access to, really on the Monero subreddit and maybe like YouTube watch statistics or whatever it might be, it's definitely US and EU focused. We haven't seen much of this direct traffic in those locations. And part of that's, I think, due to the minimal but the increasing amount of translated resources that are available. But there still is a general limitation, especially for Asian and African markets in regards to the amount of materials available. So I think that you still see most of your use in the US. In the past, before Monero changed or upgraded recently to bulletproofs, the transaction cost was probably an issue for people. It was about 30 or 50 cents to send a transaction. That's pretty expensive for developing markets. So like Monero will probably never be the most efficient, cheapest way to send money, but we're getting to the point where even for developing markets, we're getting pretty competitive. So if we're able to stay in a similar fee or price range, depending on how transaction volume and so forth work out, it's starting to make more economic sense for people in these situations too.
I have another question regarding the Bisq platform itself. It's nice to see the increase in transactions and in volumes. Was there also increase for arbitrage demand? Is there like how many approximately percentage-wise of transactions require an arbitrage?
Unfortunately, I don't have recent numbers, but it's basically, I mean, we have had in the latest releases quite a lot of important bug fixes, so that have brought arbitration cases lower. I've been myself arbitrator in August, and there were there was trade volume not so high like now, but there were very few cases. There were many days without any case. So I think it was around, I can't remember the number, but I think it was maybe 1 or 2% of from the number of trades which ended up in arbitration. I cannot give a real number now. I would need to ask the arbitrators what's the current rate of cases, but it's not very high. And most cases we still have a few bugs with that transactions don't get or correctly created or confirmed or whatever. And yeah, I mean, real disputes that one trader said, yeah, I've sent the money, and that no, I've not received it, and they don't come to an agreement are super, super rare. I think I don't remember even one when I was the first 1.5 years I was arbitrator. And also this real kind like scam attempts or disputes, they are nearly non-existent. It's usually software bugs, usability problems, banking problems. So yeah, you send the money and then the bank has whatever limitations and block you, or you need more time or whatever. mistakes. Sometimes when there was high volatility, but that was more with altcoins, there was kind of like future trading problems, so that you take an offer and then the next hour the price goes in one direction extremely, changes very extremely in one direction, and then for you economically, it would, for you as a Bitcoin buyer, when you need to send now the altcoin, it would be rational basically to not continue the trade and to lose your security deposit, because that loss is less like the difference with the new price. So then you have an incentive basically to not complete the trade, let it go to arbitration, then the other trader gets your security deposit. So you get a reimbursement basically for the lost trading opportunity, but you have at the end lost less money, like when you would have completed the trade with the worse price, and instead you're starting a new trade with the better market price. That was an issue in times of very high volatility. Also in the Bitcoin market, when Bitcoin was going up like crazy in 1 or 2 days, but it's very rare. And we have changed in the amount of the required security deposit for the buyer, so it's much more expensive for him now to do this. And also these cases, I think, have become very rare, but sometimes they are. But from numbers, I think it's not more than 5%. Hopefully it's around 1 or 2%, and I think that's a number what we cannot decrease much more, because there will be always, especially with banks, you cannot avoid it. It's basically out of our controls that they are doing their bullshit. And of course, the bug size and usability side, we work to improve and to get this number lower. But there will, especially when we get more mainstream users who are not so familiar with Bitcoin and not so technical, they make more mistakes. So we will always have a certain percentage of such issues. But I just posted yesterday a new proposal for a new trade protocol, which will not have arbitration anymore. I don't want to get in this, but we have some interesting plans and ideas to find new solutions how to deal with these problems. And but that's another topic for another discussion.
We are reaching the end of our call soon. We asked you so many questions, Justin and Scott. Do you have any questions from your side or any final remarks regarding Bisq and Monero?
Scott, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I can go first. Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited that the demand is actually there from like a user use case perspective for Monero to have integration. As someone who uses Monero, it's very exciting to have an alternative to, say, Kraken or I think Bitfinex in terms of like a fiat on-ramp into Monero. And so it's definitely something that going forward I will be a very strong advocate for in the developer channel, and trying to get a developer or developers from the Monero community working on this proposal, I guess. So we'll see what happens. We have a lot of smart people, so hopefully someone will be interested. So
yeah, so I guess a few questions. Have you considered making a Monero form funding system request yourself, or either a specific Monero related project with Bisq, or even for Bisq? Will either of you or anyone from the Bisq community consider coming on the Monero coffee chat that we have once a month, and come to the regular Monero community IRC meetings?
Manfred, do you want to take? Sorry, I didn't understand the beginning of the question. Was it about if we have a concrete project where we are working on with Monero?
No, like if you have considered using the Monero form funding system for a specific. So if you had a developer in mind that wanted to work on a Monero specific integration or found one, have you considered doing a Monero form funding system to cover those costs?
I have not considered it more closely mainly because I don't have time to drive this. I'm super busy with the DAO and 100,000 other things. And especially with the Monero community, I know there are a lot of potential developers and people out who can join. We need to grow on the development side and on the contributor side. So I would like that somebody from the Monero side comes, take this and do the funding however they like, either from the Monero side or mixed, or just from the Bisq side. As said, also such work on such projects are certainly up for compensation with BSQ. And at least in a few months, it will be then really tradable and real money. At the moment, okay, it's maybe some people need to trust Bisq and have some confidence in Bisq, but yeah, they can combine it. There could be even some donation. We have some money in our donation fund. So funding shouldn't be really a big issue. And yeah, to be more in contact and more active in the Monero community would be great. But again, we are very limited from our resources in that area. I have, by the way, tomorrow, I'm a guest on a Monero talk podcast. So yeah, I mean, I'm open when anybody want to have interview or talk, or just ping me, or anybody else in Bisq. It's just, yeah, we are super short basically with our human resources, and that's the main reason why we are not more active. But I mean, for me, Monero is the closest, even sometimes closer, like with Bitcoin, because I mean, the community is always broad, and but I think yeah, the core values of Bisq is privacy protection and security, and that's 100% overlap with the core values of Monero. So from this point of view, yeah, it's the perfect community for Bisq, and it's not by chance now the most traded currency. And yeah, I'm looking forward to get more cooperation and more synergy between the two projects.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, so I'm wrapping it up. Thanks everyone for joining the call. Thanks for watching the live stream. And if you're interested to get more involved in Bisq, just join us on Slack. I will post the links below the description after the call, or join our GitHub repository. There are lots of bounties. Manfred mentioned a couple of them, which you could take to get into coding on the Bisq client, which are, if you have an engineering background, is quite doable. And if you don't have any engineering background, we have lots of tasks and roles to be taken. Yeah, just approach us, and we're quite open for any support. And yeah, so see you soon. And thanks for watching again and joining us in the call. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us on.